Hi, everyone. Welcome to Reid Hall. I'm Marie Dorini. I'm the Paris director of the Columbia Institute for Ideas and Imagination. Thank you so much for coming to this pre-concert conversation that George Lewis has organized. We'll say a little bit more about where you are and how this concert came to be before the concert. This conversation will last about 40 minutes. Then we'll take a few minutes to reset the room. And after the concert, there'll be a reception in the salle de conférence next door where you will be able to get the book that George and Dr. Harold Kisiedu put together called Composing While Black, Afrodiasporic New Music Today. And so we urge you to get your own copies. And if you're lucky, they'll sign it for you. And George will introduce the speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. Well, I'm looking around, I see a lot of people I know. I can't believe this. Some of them I haven't seen in a really long time. So you're gonna be really mad at me because I say I might, if you don't get mad if I don't remember your name right away because, well, you might get mad. I mean, it's okay. I mean, but thank you all for coming. You know, I'm, you know, sometimes these things happen and I'm very happy to see all of you. I mean, this is my first time in Paris for quite a number of years, and now that I'm a fellow of the Columbia Institute for Ideas and Imagination, people have been very welcoming, and I'll thank everyone later in a longer preamble. But for now, I think I'll keep it brief by just announcing our panelists for today. First of all, I'd like to recognize the Corie Soumah, composer, Alyssa, Regent, composer, and Harold Kisiedu, Dr. Harold Kisiedu, who will be the interlocutor for this evening's panel. Please welcome them.
Bonsoir, messieurs, dames. Good evening, everybody. I'm very, very thrilled to be here. I was in Paris for the first time, I believe it was in 1982, 1983. I think Paris was the first city that I really fell in love with. And it's been almost 30 years since I came to Paris, and I got here this morning. And I'm still mesmerized by the beauty of the city, the boulevards, the friendliness of the people. So it's a real joy to be here, and I feel very fortunate and very honored to be moderating this panel. I'd like to welcome you all to this panel. My name is Harold Kisiedu. I'm a musicologist, an author, educator, musician, and as Professor Lewis just stated, the co-editor of Composing While Black, Afrodiasporic New Music Today. And as for the format of this panel, I'm going to introduce both panelists in a second. And both panelists are going to talk about their works, their methods, their aesthetics for a bit. And then we're going to, based on that, have a discussion on stage, and towards the end, you're gonna have the opportunity to ask the panelists questions. So I'm gonna open the floor for questions. So please allow me to introduce the panelists for tonight, Alyssa Regent and Corie Soumah. Alyssa Regent is a composer from the archipelago of Guadeloupe. She is inspired by what she calls the unseen, seeking to evoke passions and sensations that are deeply rooted in introspection. She harvests from the ethereal, enigmatic intersections between music and spirituality. Regent has participated in several music festivals and programs, such as the 77th Composers Conference at Brandeis University, String Quartet Evolution at the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity, Canada, New Music on the Point, Leicester, Vermont, and the Lucerne Music Festival. She was awarded the ASCAP Foundation Morton Gould Young Composer Award in 2023. She's currently pursuing a PhD in music at Columbia University, New York, and is the curator of Comparing Domains of Improvisation. Regent lives and works in New York. Corie Soumah is a composer currently based also in New York. She's interested in shaping fractured and reconstructed sound components through hypercollages and visceral physical gestures. Her approach is characterized by a keen interest in the interweaving of multiple aesthetic and sonic elements from the perspective of Afrodiasporic geologies. Soumah is currently pursuing a Doctor of Musical Arts and Composition at Columbia University, New York. She completed a Bachelor of Music in Instrumental Composition from the Conservatoire de Musique de Montréal. Her works have been performed by several ensembles and performers in Canada, the US, France, Germany, the Netherlands, and Italy. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Alyssa, Regent, and Corie Soumah.
All right, so good evening, everyone. I am delighted to be here tonight. I've been living in New York for about 11 to 12 years, and I'm really happy to be in France. As a French citizen, it's really, really important for me to be here and to share my music with all of you. Today I will talk about my piece, Emergence, that you will hear tonight on the program. This piece I wrote for a festival that I did this past summer in July in Ticino. And I had a really interesting instrumentation. I had violin, bass flute, bass clarinet, trombone. So I asked for a viola immediately. I was like, this is not happening with a violin, no. And I couldn't do that. So my first thing, I detuned the G string of the violin to a D so that it's more like a viola. And a lot of the violin writing is just happening on that string. It's either really low or really high, no in between. So that was my first thing. And Emergence came out of an inspiration after I saw a movie by Kobo Abe. I think the adaptation was by Kobo Abe. The movie is called The Woman in the Dune. And maybe some of you have read the book or seen the movie, but to make it short, there's this Japanese man who goes on a trip to capture insects in the sand. And then he gets tricked by a bunch of villagers, and he falls into this well of sand where a woman lives at the bottom. And throughout the whole movie, he's trying to escape. And the sand more and more becomes this extra character with its own conscience that prevents this man to get away from that hole. And as much as he tries to get out or to emerge from that hole, he cannot because of the texture of the sand, because of the hallucination that he's having due to the heat and many other things. And while he's stuck at the bottom, he develops a relationship with the woman, and eventually she gets sick, and the villagers put down a ladder, which is the only way to get out of that pit. And they take the woman out because she needs to go to the hospital. However, the man, for the first time, has an opportunity to actually get out of his situation, but he doesn't. He stays at the bottom, and he just decides to stay in this situation. So I was really touched by this because I think for my experience in New York, many times I felt stuck because, being an artist is difficult. I was living without my family as well, and having to walk in the dark in a career that you never know if you will actually make it or not is difficult. So I was really touched by this film, and I thought, interesting, well, I can write a piece called Emergence, and show the struggle of trying to get out of a texture. One thing I did for this piece, I prepared the violin bow. So I was looking for a sandy texture, and I knew some techniques, extended techniques as we call them, to do that, but I needed something more potent, something more visceral. Like I said in my bio, I'm really interested in introspection, so everything that is from the inside of the body out. So I needed to feel that grainy texture. So I just bought a really cheap bow from Amazon and I prepared it with bow hair. So I wrapped the hair around the wood of the bow and I braided it. The reason why I did a braid was because braiding is something that is cultural in Guadeloupe. We braid each other's hair. And I figured, well, all of my music comes from me and my music has to reflect who I am. So I'm going to add a braid. And it's added this even more like contrast in the sand texture that I was looking for. So that's how the piece came about. And then it was premiered. One fun fact, I had written a really difficult part for the bass flute. So the bass flute only had tongue rams. And tongue rams are really tiring. And the entire 9 minutes of it was tongue rams. And the flautist, the original flautist, thought that I was trying to kill her. So she made me change it. We worked together on it. We collaborated. And this is also something important in my practice. It's collaboration with performers. You never write in a vacuum as a composer. And I think, Corie, you're going to talk about your practice as well. But for me, you never write in a vacuum. You write for people. And it's important to develop those relationships with people. So I adapted the piece to my flautist, and then we figured out like what would be a good balance to make that happen. Yeah, so that's the origin of Emergence.
Thanks very much, Alyssa, for sharing this with us. There are a few things that come to mind. I was very intrigued by the fact that you mentioned the movie Woman in the Dunes, because I remember watching that film when I was a graduate student at Columbia, because Columbia has this incredible library, especially these DVs, these Criterion Collection DVs of classic, important films from not just from the U.S. but from Europe and from Japan as well. And if I remembered correctly, it was Takemitsu who wrote.
Yes, Toru Takemitsu wrote the score of that film.
He wrote the score. He wrote the score, and I'm even hesitant to call it a score because I feel like it's much more than that. It's like the music is, equally important compared to, the screenplay and the acting and all of that. And I was wondering to what extent this also informed your conception of Emergence.
Sure. So I didn't try to, do a depiction of the film in the music, but I tried to capture the essence of what I felt watching that film. So it's really just about a melody trying to get out of a texture. And sometimes I hide it or I make it disappear with air sounds, or I emphasize it with like a trombone line that goes up, or I hide it between patterns of 30-second notes. And at the end, I have a really difficult trombone line that is extremely high. And several times I've been told, this is really difficult to play after the entire piece. We're tired as trombonists, it's difficult. And I keep telling all my trombonists, this is exactly what I'm looking for, that struggle to get out of the texture. So the point of that last final line was really to try to climb up that sand pit in a way. But yes, I think I wouldn't say that I tried to do what Toru Takemitsu did, because it really sounds completely different. But through his use of the music in the film, I understood how to myself take from what I felt and make sounds out of it.
I was also intrigued by this notion of unplayability, what you just referred to. The trombone is telling you, this is, are you trying to kill me? This is almost, impossible to play. And this is, of course, this is not just confined to new music. I had to think of a very famous example is Beethoven's Kreutzer Sonata, which Rudolf Kreutzer hated and probably never played. He deemed it unplayable. And George Bridgetower, who was, Afro-Polish, sight-read it. He was a composer, by the way, as well. So can you talk more about, your experiences, your relationship with this trope of unplayability and how it, the significance of it for your compositional practice?
I don't think it's a requirement in new music, especially for it to be difficult, but I think that the difficulty has meaning. So like I said in my piece, I was looking for the struggle. But I can also express struggle in different ways in other pieces. For example, in my last piece, my last sound cycle, Morse Oskuli, I have a really loud bass drum that I stuff with like a pillow or like some sort of sheet on top of it. And I asked the percussionist to hit it triple forte. So I'm asking for that energy that I know the bass drum cannot give me back. So that's not unplayability, but that's kind of play on that concept of pushing something to a limit that it cannot achieve in order to get to the struggle. And I like that. I'm not saying that I like performers to struggle. I kind of do, a little bit. But it's important to me that we feel that the music is coming from their bodies, if that makes sense. There is a certain gestural movement or energy that I like to see when they play. Yeah.
So I don't mean to psychologize or so here, but I really hate it when people do that. But I was just wondering when you talked about it, there seems to be a connection to what you shared with us earlier about your experiences making it in New York. So is that an extension of that?
I'll say yes and no. Everything that I write is of course informed by the experiences that I've had. My life in New York has not always been easy. I mean, it's like that for everybody. New York is a difficult city to live in. But I think that I saw myself come out of many different types of struggles. So it's something that I'm comfortable expressing because I've been through it in a way, yes.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Bonsoir, good evening. My name is Corie Soumah. I'm extremely happy to be here. I wanted to give a few thanks to the Paris Global Center for having us tonight. Also Ensemble Itinéraire and the International Contemporary Ensemble for joining us for this really amazing concert. Special thanks to George, who's been fostering this event. Also in Berlin before. It's been quite the incredible experience for a lot of us here. So I thought that I would follow also what Alyssa has been doing, which is talking about my practice. And when I was thinking about, a panel about composing while Black, what it could, be, I was mostly thinking about this idea that some people have, which is composing as a Black person is a single condition, meaning that we have this kind of sound that is the same for everyone. But I think you're gonna hear tonight with the concert with so many different composers that there's a multiplicities of aesthetics, a multiplicities of creativity of connections, of how you imbricate what's personal to you into the work. So I think it's important. I think it's important for me that we get to share a little bit about our own process for the pieces. So my practice, so I'm from Montreal, and I'm also currently based in New York, although it lasts longer than Alyssa has been. So my practice when I started doing music has been mostly in electroacoustic music, which is something a lot of people in Montreal do. And then I moved afterwards to study at the Conservatoire to really work with instruments. And I have built this practice looking into sound and gestures being really important parts of how I create a new work. So they are three important central points in when I come to create a new work that I think about, which is reconstructing sounds, hypercollage, visceral gestures, and Afrodiasporic geology. So I'm just gonna briefly describe what they mean to me. So this idea of reconstructing sound is I like to start with a single idea cell and rewriting this idea multiple times. Often it can be 30 times, 40 times, and trying to find different variations for it to kind of bring different pathway that I wouldn't think about when I start writing this music. There's also this idea of hypercollage where I like to, just like when you're using tape for acousmatic music and you move different sections, I like doing that with sound as well. So cutting different small cells and creating something that sounds like a collage. But I also like this idea of having different forces that are contrasting and just bringing them together to create new movement inside the music. And then what's really important to me as I been pursuing music is when I started, I thought there was a lot of focus from the people that were around me around pitch and harmony being like really important center to everything. And personally for me, pitch is not really interesting, but sound is. So I like to think of gestures, but I like to think also of how the performer will create the piece, right? Because performer spends years literally thinking about their body and how a sound will be made. So I really have a lot of visceral gestures happening when I do a work. And then finally, this idea of Afrodiasporic geologies, which is something I've been exploring recently, is a term that I came up with after reading the book by Catherine Youssef called A Billion Black Anthropocene or None, where Youssef is basically exploring this, the usage of geologies, the vocabulary of geologies that has been used in history to often violently exclude Black and Indigenous people. And she does a really interesting analysis from, the first wave of colonialism throughout today, and she explained how those terms has been used, like excavation, thinking up from the land, breaking the resources, replanting the land, and that was really interesting to me. But I was also thinking, what would be a counter term for whatever she was describing, which was really violent, and I thought, Afrodiasporic geologies would be interesting. And for me, it's simply bringing, fostering a connection through the art, but also embracing multiplicities and different poetic differences. So I think of that in my work by having a lot of information in it and trying to find little moments that can bring some sort of difference in it. So I just want to say a few words about a piece that's going to be performed tonight, which is called Limpidité 4, which is a piece for solo violin that is amplified. So this piece was originally commissioned by a Canadian performer named Gillian Smith. And she asked a bunch of composers to come together and create a piece each based around the concept of voice. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what voice could mean, and I wasn't really interested in having someone else speaking my voice personally, and I thought that it would be interesting having parts of different voices. So my voice as a composer, because it's still, my work, but voice of the performers and voice of the violin. So what you're gonna hear tonight is literally sound of the voice of the performer, but also a sound of the violin that you wouldn't think a violinist will make. So the amplification is extremely important, and it's a very virtuosic piece. It's a lot of cadenzas. It moves around a lot, and yeah, I'm really excited for people to have the chance to hear it.
Thank you very much, Corie. You, towards the beginning of what you just said, you talked about a multiplicity of aesthetics. So in terms of composing while Black, the one of the things associated with it is the idea that it's not monolithic, which is pretty much in line with what you just said. Can you talk about the significance of asserting, for you as an Afrodiasporic, Afro-Quebecois composer, the significance of a multiplicity of aesthetics?
Yeah, I mean, I think it also has to do with my personal experience into, talking to people and be like, yeah, I'm a composer. And they're like, oh, so you do like hip hop? And I'm just like, nah, not at all. And they're like, oh, so you're like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, I'm writing for instruments. Oh, jazz. And I'm like, nah, not at all. And also when I explain what I'm doing, that's usually when I think I lost a few people, because they're like, so you're doing weird sounds and with like electronics and stuff. And I over time, it just gets really annoying, right? You're like, but if you talk to me, I have, I like nerdy things. That's who I am. I like experimental sounds, right? And the more I personally look into other Afrodiasporic composers, it's the same thing. They all have little things that they are obsessed with. We're all obsessed with something as composers. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that we get to bring it out in different ways through sound, which is really exciting.
And that still baffles people. I mean, we were on a panel a few days ago in Berlin, right? And was in addition to both of you, it was Andile Khumalo, who's from South Africa, but studied in Stuttgart and in New York, and Charles Uzor, who left during the Biafra War and grew up in Switzerland. And I spoke to a well-known composer afterwards, and she said to me, well, these people on the panel, they were also different. And it didn't sound as if that was a good thing. So, it almost sounded as if she was looking for some sort of, commonality, some sort of Black sound that could be easily identified. But in your work, you're defying that, right?
Yeah, I think everyone should be allowed to use different sounds, right? I think it's very limiting. Even outside of just Afrodiasporic composers, I think composers in general, should be open to try different things and not be afraid to, stray a little bit from what they're usually doing. And I think for artists, I really admire when people do that, take that risk. It really pays off, and you're not gonna lose your identity by doing that, by moving into a different direction. There's still some part of you in the work, so I really believe in that personally.
I was also intrigued by what you said about foregrounding sound rather than pitch in your work, and that you were more interested in sound, all things sonic rather than pitch. Can you talk a bit more about that? Why is that, and how does that play out in your music?
Yeah, I think when I decided I wanted to do music after I finished high school, and I went to that undergrad composition thing, we started the class literally by listening to soundscape music and birds and rocks, and everyone was like, I thought we were gonna write a string quartet or whatever. And over time, if you start that way and you just listen to sounds, you go field recording and just take time to think about how you can expand those sounds. When you go on the other side and people suggest to you a lot that pitch is really important, you analyze a lot of work where they explain to you the chords and how they've mesh together the chords, for me, I thought it was weird because there were so many parameters that make sense. Just, timbre, there's rhythm, there's dynamic, and often I felt those things were kind of eclipsed in the language of things. And I think sound is usually, what people are going afterwards, especially in experimental music. And I think it's just the language and how you explain that differs for people. And yeah, it's just, for me, it's just better, it connects better to think about the sound and how sound evolves in my work than thinking in those regiments.
You also used the phrase poetics of difference, and I would like for you to elaborate a bit more on the intersection between this notion of poetics of difference and your work as a composer.
Yeah, this one is a little bit more personal. So I grew up with a Quebec mom and a Senegalese dad, and often people kind of try to put you in either you're like a Quebec person or you're a Senegalese person. You can't ever be both of those things together. But I think that's just who I am. I like to listen to Claude Pelgag, who's like a Quebec artist, and also eat a mafé. Like, it's fine with me. And I think in my music, there's a lot of those contradiction, if we could say there are contradictions, of stuff, you would think they don't really make sense to be in the same space, but I think it creates really a different movement and different possibilities. And that really excites me, to be thinking about it that way and kind of just having a space where things can happen, really.
So, in a sense, it's a form of creolization. Is that?
Oh yeah, it is, definitely it is. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So at this point, I'd like to open the floor for questions. If you have questions for the panelists, there's a mic going around. So if you're so inclined to ask a question, please feel free.
Hi, greetings. Thank you very much for this enlightening conversation. Can you talk a little bit, I was wondering, if there was room for improvisation, and you as composer, are you concerned at all with improvisation?
Concerned in what way? Negative way?
No, not concerned, like, because you see...
Interested, maybe?
No, yes. If you're interested, yes. Because, sometimes we have that negative perception, like there is a dichotomy between improvisation. What I like actually is when you mention about the conversation, you had something in your mind, and then when you spoke with the instrumentalist, they mentioned certain thing, and then you took that into consideration. And if you can maybe,
Yeah, sure. So it's not a dictatorship, being a composer. Improvisation, I think, is important. It has its space, and we should utilize it. So something that I do at Columbia, I curate discussion talks called CDI, Comparing Domain of Improvisations. And what we do in those discussions, we take two different domains and we compare them, and we talk about how artists improvise. And I think composition and improvisations are really close, because when I start a piece, I have to start by improvising the piece, and then I refine it, and then I make some rules for myself and all of that. And I don't think that this excludes improvisation. So now if I write a piece that is completely improvised, and I'm sure you will, I believe we will hear that tonight. Some pieces have improvisations on the program. That's also a thing. The important thing for me would be to know the performer and to see what they come up with. It's not so much about controlling the conversation all the time. Sometimes you just want to let it loose in that way. And improvisation is not just doing whatever you want as well. You listen to each other. It's communication rather than just being in your own world. So I am very interested in improvisation, actually. Yes. You're welcome.
Yeah, I guess the idea of communication is really important. When I start working with someone, I always ask them if they're comfortable doing stuff that are improvised, because it's not everyone that's comfortable, which is perfectly fine. I think every composer is a little bit of improvisers, like you say. We don't usually come out with something that's set in stone and it's all there. I think there's a form of improvisation in the act of it. I personally, in my pieces, I use a form of hybrid notation. So there's some traditional informations in it, but there's also graphical information or text-based. So I would kind of guide the improvisers, the performers, to improvise in a certain state. But I think it's very alive in the process, and just, when you go in the first rehearsal of your piece and you talk with the performer, they know better often their instruments.
Absolutely.
And they always bring something that's kind of a form of improvisation, right? They'll say like, oh, I think of this texture, do you want to try it? And it's part of them being in the conversation with you. So yeah, communication is really essential, and that can lead to a form of improv. Yeah.
Hi. I have a question for both of you, actually. I would like to know, even though we should not consider it that your blackness influenced everything, but what in the pieces that we're going to listen tonight, you think your blackness has a influence in?
I think no matter what we do, the fact that we're black makes it black, So anything that I will create will be a black thing, because this is who I am. Anything that I'm going to create will be a French Guadeloupean thing, because this is who I am. So like Corie said, there's not one monolith of what black is, and this is why we talk about Afrodiaspora and polydiaspora, because we are all so different, and we should be allowed in every different type of spaces doing any sort of arts and craft and really anything, because at the end of the day it's about you being a human, Even if AI can do anything, then I'm pretty sure we can. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, so everything informs the blackness in the music. Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Nothing to add on that.
Mic drop.
Hi, thank you for coming to Paris. Question for both of you. I'm just curious. I'd be curious to hear you speak about how your styles adheres to, or maybe contradicts, an older practice. If that's an interesting thing for you to talk about with respect to your own work, and yeah, maybe your thoughts about why new music maybe sometimes tries to cut itself away from like a more traditional compositional practice.
I think, at least for me, maybe Corie has a different answer, but for me, it's about being creative. So I'm not saying that you cannot be creative within a certain set of rules. You can, but this is not what I want to do. So I create my own rules in a way, So if I write, let's say, a piano piece, I could follow the sonata form. I could do that, but so many people have done that too. So I could also do something else and it would be okay, So I think it's really about being creative. And I don't think I think of music in terms of, oh, I'm breaking away from this, or I'm being opposite, or I'm reacting to something else. It's more like, oh, this is really cool. How can I make it my own? And then I make it my own. Because making it my own means to me taking it, having a certain introspective outlook on it, how it feels on me and within my head and my body, and then putting it out there for other people to express or experience what I experienced. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I feel if you start thinking when you write a piece that you're going to invent something new that's never been out there, I think you're already lost the battle, because you can't really know if that's going to happen. And I don't think, for me, it doesn't really matter. Like, I'm not here to make something that's going to be entirely like new from like A to Z, right? I think everyone takes inspiration from different places. I think what matters the most, and that doesn't apply just to Afrodiasporic composers, it applies for a lot of creative people, is finding what is true to you will resonate to other people, and to embrace that as much as possible. Because you could be in a style that's, you know, restrictive, whatever you want to call it, and still manage to break through it by just being true to yourself. And that sounds a little bit silly, but it's actually really hard to do. I think it's just how we are in society. There's barriers and there's this, you know, pressure sometimes. And often in music, for example, people feel like they have to be experimental. You don't have to be experimental in everything you do. You can reuse what you've done before and explore it more. There are so many different approaches, but being true to yourself is really, really important. And
allowing yourself to be creative.
Thank you, Corie. Thank you, Alyssa. It's been an absolute pleasure, delight. Thank you all for attending this panel. And I hope you all enjoy the performance that's gonna start in about 12 minutes. Yeah. Thank you.
Merci.
Good evening, everyone. Hello, hello. I'm speaking to you from the balcony, which the French people call les enfants du paradis. So we are here in paradise. My name is Brune. As the director of Columbia Global Center, I want to welcome all of you to Reid Hall. Reid Hall was gifted to Columbia University, and I say gifted, in 1964 by Helen Rogers Reid, who was the daughter-in-law of Elizabeth Mills Reid, who acquired the property in 1893. And both of these women were the ones who saw Reid Hall through its entire French-American journey until it was gifted to Columbia University. And even though both of them were responsible for this place, the place is named after Elizabeth Mills Reid because she is the one who bought the property, and she is the one who gave it all of her support throughout all of these years that she was alive. So tonight's event is part of a whole series of events that celebrate Columbia University's presence at Reid Hall for the past 60 years. And we really want to thank Professor George Lewis for having invited the ICE, International Contemporary Ensemble, to Paris, and especially to this wonderful place. So I hope you enjoy tonight's concert, and I turn it over to Marie.
Thank you, Romeo. That one's for you, Lauren Robertson. That's a shout out to you. I'm Marie Dorigny. I'm the Paris director of the Columbia Institute for Ideas and Imagination, where George Lewis is currently a fellow, right here in the next door building at Reid Hall. The first thing George said minutes after learning he would be spending the year in Paris was, I want to organize a concert with the International Contemporary Ensemble honoring Black composers in the Grande Salle at Reid Hall. So wish granted. Thanks to Brune, most wishes are granted in this magical garden. And so here we are. Huge thanks to you, George, the artistic director of ICE, and also a professor at Columbia University, our university, to Claude Arpels, Jennifer Kessler, Anna Klein, Rodier, and everyone at ICE, and to Sari Castro, Meredith Hunter-Mason, and everyone at the Paris Global Center, and to all of you, the lucky audience, for making this night happen. Evenings like this one are why Reid Hall exists, so it's fitting that this is part of the 60th anniversary. I can't think of a more dreamy constellation, an all-star lineup chosen by the extraordinary George. And ICE is also an important and exceptional organization, as is clear from this evening's program. We've been wanting to welcome you, ICE, here for years. And actually, we'd organized a concert with Rebecca months before. That was scheduled in March 2020, so didn't happen. And so we're extremely happy to be contributing to putting back the I, international, back in ICE, and honored that it's happening on such a momentous night. ICE makes magic happen, and Reid Hall is where it happens. Long may this match made in our heaven continue. Thank you.
Wow, thanks. Thank you, Brune. Thank you, Marie, for this extraordinary. One of the things you've done, among other things, is that I don't have to say the first part of my speech, which is very good because you already heard what I do here. I mean, what I'm trying to do here, by the way, it's I'm trying to write a piece, but I'm also trying to learn a bit more about AI. And so I'm working with the great Gérard Asiag, who's here tonight, and at IRCAM, which is, in a way, it's je suis de retour à IRCAM après 40 ans. J'étais là dans les années 80, c'était 85, 84, when I made Rainbow Family, which was one of the first AI pieces ever done there. It might have been the first. In any event, I'm still at it again, still trying to get these computers to play music and listen to stuff and act like us. You know, that used to be called intelligence, but I'm not so sure anymore. But in any event, tonight's event, this is the part of the preamble I had to finish right quick, is as you can read in the program, is a unique international collaboration between ICE and the Paris-based Ensemble, l'Itinéraire, which is amazing to be able to get together with them, one of the world's finest ensembles for contemporary music for the past 30 years. And this gives you, an audience based in Paris, the opportunity to experience a new generation of Afrodiasporic composers from around the world, such as the people we just heard from, Alyssa Regent and Corie Soumah. And we are so excited, they're totally thrilled to present this program, which we believe to be the first concert of Afrodiasporic contemporary music to be presented in France in many years. And if someone can tell me of another one that happened since I was here in 1984, I'd be happy to hear about it. I do know that I was on this stage last in 2019, where I brought two pieces to the Philharmonie as part of the work with the Ensemble Intercontemporain. They played two of my pieces, and so I called the conductor and I said, well, you know, this might be one of those black firsts. You know, so what do you mean? He said, I don't think the Ensemble Intercontemporain has ever played any music by any black composers. He said, that can't be true. I'll get back to you. They never did. So. But in any event, so there's some work to be done. The ensemble has just come from, and let me show you this, a week-long residency at the Haus der Kulturen der Welt in Berlin. And this is the book that came out of that. This is the English version. They also did a German version. And the residency was conceived as a space for intergenerational, international innovation. And by 2023, Harold Kisidu, my co-editor, and I began calling this kind of music Afrodiasporic, a term that began to resonate in both Europe and the US and maybe elsewhere. And this book, this bilingual book, I can show you this right now, Composing While Black, Afrodiasporic, New Music Today, or Afrodiasporische Neue Musik heute, is one output of this process. And there's a series of essays by scholars about different approaches to Afrodiasporic composition, because one of the things we learned from listening to Corie and Alyssa is that there, despite what people might think, there is no black sound, and you can't like say, so where's the black part of your music? You know, or well, here's the black part, we'll stick it right in here. You know? You can't do that. And so basically it's much more diverse than that, much more diffuse. But at the same time, we're thinking about the fact that my feeling has been, and I wrote an essay a few years ago called Décoloniser la musique contemporaine en 8 étapes difficiles, and not 8 easy steps, but 8 hard steps to decolonization. And the idea there was that we needed to think about the fact that Afrodiasporic new music is sort of worldwide, and there are many different articulations of it. We're going to see all these articulations, not all of them, but a bunch of them tonight. So the purpose of this residency in Berlin was to nurture and develop new modes of expertise on contemporary Afrodiasporic sonic experimentalism, and also to present perspectives that we feel have been largely ignored in academic research, concert programs, and journalistic coverage, and particularly in Europe, since that's where we are. So we're trying to think about how to décoloniser l'Europe and décoloniser la France in terms of Afrodiasporic composers. So we had people from Guadeloupe, from the UK, from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the US, South Africa, Kenya, New Zealand, Canada, Switzerland, and Jamaica to do a week of discussions, panel presentations, and a 5-day seminar designed to develop ideas about where Afrodiasporic new music might be headed. So my use of the term Afrodiasporic is meant to supersede notions of home and away, you know, the old idea of the diaspora where you had Africa and the diaspora or something like that. But instead of that, we're thinking about flows, a rhizome of flows from everywhere in all directions, or talking about a mobile musical subject, or what I think was Ottmar Etta in writing about the Afro-German philosopher Anton Wilhelm Amo from the 18th century, called Philosophie ohne festen Wohnsitz. That means philosophy without a fixed abode. So we're talking a bit about Musik ohne festen Wohnsitz. In other words, there's no single place where this music arises. It's all over the place. It's going to be everywhere. Musique sans domicile fixe. So, or to say something that also turned up in the conversation just now with Dr. Casidu, Corie, and Lisa, Edouard Glissant, in an interview with Mantia Diawara, talked about the concept of consenting not to be a single being, which then Fred Moten took up and made something very important out of that as well. Just an offhand remark by Glissant became extremely important. So this is what we're doing, because Afrodiasporic new music is a really very highly diverse field. So, but this residency, you know, I like the weird stuff. So we're gonna be, and someone said, what's the relationship between this music and the tradition? Well, it certainly is part of the tradition, just like the previous range of weirdos was. You know, it's part of the tradition, and so you have to think about it like that, but it's not like, oh, we have tradition here and we have the new over here. We're all connected up, and what was traditional today was new a while back. So think about, I'm interested in countering mainly the myth of absence, that there's nobody around doing this music, or if they are, they aren't very good. And so the reason for doing this is that we need to develop new expertise, and that includes you. You're going to listen to this concert, and you all have a certain mode of learning about what goes on here, and you'll be, you know, it'll be like this. There'll be, somebody will call you up and they'll say, well, look, you know, did you see that concert at the Reid Hall with the Afrodiasporic composers? So yeah, I heard that. So did you know about any of these people? No. So why not? You're supposed to be an expert. Maybe we need some new experts. So that's what we want. So, you know, as new music becomes decolonized, becomes creolized, we're going to be looking at the role of Columbia, which Brunhilde Bibuck and Marie during you talked about. You know, it's a funny thing. You might not have noticed this, but over the past decade, Columbia University has become one of the main world staging grounds in US and European academia for Afrodiasporic new music. Well, I've been teaching there for 21 years. Just recently, we got Professor Marcos Balter, who's also on our composition faculty. Dr. Casidu got his doctorate in musicology in 2014. And then all but 2 of the featured composers, Alyssa Regent, Andile Khumalo from South Africa, Corie Soumah from Quebec, Hannah Kendall from the UK, and Jessie Cox from Switzerland. they all have ties to Colombia, some going back a decade. And so you're not going to be able to get the single black sound from these people from all over the world. But it seems appropriate to hold this concert at a Columbia University space. So again, I'd like to thank the Paris Global Center and its director, Brunhilde Bibuk, the Columbia Institute for Ideas and Imagination, and its director, Paris, Marie Dorigny. Also to be thanked to this fantastic staff they've got here, Charlotte Forrest, this right there, sitting there, Meredith Hunter Mason, where is she? I saw her somewhere, weren't you there? Sari Castro, and Krista Fowry, James Allen, incredible people on this staff. And that's the staff here. And then we've got to talk about the staff of ICE, including Executive Director Jennifer Kessler, who's here, and this evening, along with Anna Klein, Executive Producer, Isabel Crespo-Pardo, Eric Humble, Remy Shimoda, and musician representative Clara Warnar. And also represented tonight is the ICE board and the president of co-president Claude Arpels. So we're happy for all these people. And then l'itinéraire, we have Sylvain Deroux, who's here on oboe, but in a non-playing capacity. But we also thank Lucia Peralta, the executive and artistic director, who just went off to China today, and Chloe Havel, who does Ensemble administration and production. So finally, this evening is made possible to the generous support of the Paris Center and the Institute for Ideas and Imagination, the Cornelia G. Bronson Fund in the Department of Music at Columbia University, the Edwin H. Case Chair in American Music. Actually, I hold the Edwin H. Case Chair in American Music. And then the Chesswater Foundation and the Larry and Arlene Dunn Fund for Diasporic Music. So now I'm going to get off and let the great musicians of ICE and l'itinéraire do their thing, but I just wanted to note that the first piece is going to be changed. The first piece is Corie Rose Soumah's Limpidide 4 for violin solo. That will be the first work, and then the program we're seeing in regular order. Thank you all very much for coming, and have a great time.
Wasn't that now? Missing that being an act. Joy. An effort to what if we no need to test anything. What if we lived in a what if we lived in a what if we lived in a anything in liberation. What if we They wouldn't be. Is one. Effort. Slowly. These are true joy. Being a body to broke down, to broke down. It's Proton need no divisions, no tracking for active bring, not in with to make bricks, to pressing that to least pursue test what they want. and liberate. Joy, love, and joy, love, and beauty. What if we live in a world where there was, if we live in a space where figure out there wouldn't be all these intrusions, distraction, and roadblocks in the way.
Dedicate that time
And one certainly would have to dedicate their time and effort to protesting anything.
lived world, there would be no
Because anyone could at least pursue what they want and need without any encumbrance, without any interest. That would be an amazing world.
everybody.
That would be an amazing world.
Ooh, that
That would be
no need for activists.
would
Ooh,
be
that would be who's an activist now.
amazing.